Well, it's my pleasure, everyone, to welcome everyone to our conference this year, AGC 2020. We're off to a roaring start, and it's just great to see the range of people that are here. So I'm excited to see how it'll go. I'm a little bit nervous, I'll be honest, with all the technology, but it seems to be working out pretty well so far. So again, welcome to everyone. Thanks for all the backgrounds and views that you bring. I think this will be an exciting conference. And as well, we're so excited to see great speakers, and Governor O'Malley is here, but I'm not here to introduce the governor. Dr. Sheila Steinberg from Brandman University is here to say that. So just for my part, I'll just say, thank you for your support of AGC over the years, and thank you especially for your support, and I'll say patience for all of our technical stuff. I'm sure everything is going to be fine today, but there'll probably be some interesting points along the way as well. So thank you for your patience. Thanks for being here. And I want to turn things over to Dr. Sheila Steinberg to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker.
Thank you, Murray. So good morning, everybody. It's great to see all of you here. And I'm going to read a short bio here of our illustrious speaker, Governor Martin O'Malley. Governor Martin O'Malley served as the 61st governor of Maryland, past mayor of the city of Baltimore, and Democratic candidate for the office of President of the United States in 2016. He was the first of a new generation of smart city mayors that was following the United States. That was occurring in the United States. As mayor, he set Baltimore on course for the largest reduction in crime of any major city in America. As O'Malley's data-driven approach on performance management earned his city the Innovations in Government Award from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. O'Malley's performance management system, CityStat, and its Maryland progeny, StateStat, also inspired key amendments to the Government Performance and Results Act, foundational requirements intended to drive data-driven management practices across federal agencies today. Governor O'Malley is also the author of an Esri Press book entitled Smarter Government 2019. So it's a recent book. And there it is. He's holding it up as a prop. Buy it. In addition, he advises a number of technology companies. He lectures widely on topics ranging from climate change, healthcare, the environment, education, and smart cities. He is a board member of Project Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever put forward for reversing global warming. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Governor Martin O'Malley.
Dr. Steinberg, thanks a lot. It's great to see you zooming in from the Himalayas there. Is that the Himalayas behind you?
Yes, that's the Thornton, 16,000 feet. Yep.
It's not the size of the mountain, but the pebble in your shoe that keeps you from reaching the summit. So it's awesome to be with you. And Murray, good chatting with you ahead of time as well. I'll share with you one of the things that was not in Sheila's very generous bio is that as a kid, I always loved maps. Man, we had this big stretch of woods across from our house. I lived in a big housing development in the middle of a field with 300 other houses in Rockville, Maryland. But those woods that was where I hung out as a boy all the time. And I was the only kid with a map. It wasn't a great map, but I was the only kid with a map. And I put it together by, getting a long piece of string and tying knots in it every 10 feet. But so I share with you that little bit of personal background. I'm kind of wired to geography and the map. And I guess when I was able to, through the circumstances of history, combine that, pre-wiring with my training as a lawyer, when I served as mayor, they both kind of came together. So that's what I want to talk with you about. I want to share some thoughts with you about how I applied geography to the task of governing a city, governing a state, and accomplishing some really important and meaningful progress for the people that I served. Some of it life and death progress. So now here's the scariest part of my presentation, folks. That's when I see if I can share my screen. So Let me, we actually ran through this. Let me share screen, start broadcast. Yes, I want to start broadcast. 3, 2, 1, and
We see it.
hold on. Do you see my first, you see it says you are sharing screen, but you don't see my
Yes.
slides yet. So let me try to pull up my slides. You see
There
my
they are.
slide?
Yep, we see 'em.
Okay. All right. So here's my talk, folks. It is not unlike the book which Esri just published called Smarter Government. I want to talk to you about the data, the map, and the method, at least my experience with it. So there is a balance, a symmetry, if you will, between how well we govern ourselves and how much we are capable of trusting one another. According to Gallup polling, which asks the same questions, year after year, so as to be able to trace the trajectory and the trends. According to Gallup polling, in the United States of America, trust in our national government is at an all-time low. And it had been sliding that direction for 20 years. For any of you who are astute followers of American politics, in hindsight, you see it pretty clearly, right? The lack of trust, income inequality, the sense that we can't get anything done anymore, the sense that change and all of the globals are very scary things. I remember being in China and shortly after our last presidential election, and a member of the Politburo there asked of me, he said, explain something to me without any disrespect. How is it that Americans appear to have become so afraid of the future? It's a good question, huh? There's a balance between how well we govern ourselves and how much we're capable of trusting each other. So trust is as essential to democracies as oxygen is to life on the planet. So I want to talk with you about a new way of governing that I've been fortunate enough to have been on the, had a front row seat in implementing and seeing evolve. I want to share with you one insight, 2 shifts, one for leadership, one for management. And then I want to give you a few examples, just 3. I could have picked many, many examples, but it's a keynote. We're not boiling the ocean here. So I'm going to give you just 3. So let's begin, with the one insight. Over 50 years ago, the great Robert Kennedy said that it is from the numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man or woman stands up for others or strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope. That was on a refrigerator magnet on my home growing up as a boy. I'm sure many of you have seen that quote before. And when he said it, it was true. But it's not so true anymore. Why? Because the diverse acts of courage and belief are no longer numberless. They can all be numbered. Not only can they be numbered, they can be numbered and they can be plotted on a map, whether by address or longitude and latitude. And because of the internet, those what used to be numberless diverse acts of courage and belief can all be seen by everyone. What I'm talking about is the combination of 2 really powerful technologies that my adult children assume have been here forever. I'm talking about geographic information systems and the internet, evolving into the Internet of Things. This is a screenshot of my actual commute when I was teaching at Georgetown. I had to go from Baltimore to Washington, opposite sides of both of those cities at rush hour. And if you ask my neighbors, in Baltimore, they would have told you, oh, you can't get there from here at that time of day. But what I do what all of us do, and we don't even think about it, Plug in the address, and the map immediately plots from point A to point B the shortest route. And if there's an accident along the way, a pleasant sounding female voice emerges to tell me a quicker route is available. GIS and the Internet of Things. We see it everywhere. And we see it so often in our daily lives and convenience and deliveries, and that we forget that this is actually a really powerful new tool for our ability to govern ourselves and deliver the goods of the republic that make a republic worth having. So here's the one insight. Never before in human history have we had the ability to model, measure, and map dynamic human and natural systems real time in ways that everyone can see. This is a first. It's not the new technology we lack. It's the leadership practice and the new management practices. But it is coming. Mayors tend to embrace it more readily than governors, but it is coming. And it's going to envelop the entire planet. Indeed, already is. How many of you recognize this one, huh? Since I'm zooming in from Baltimore, Maryland, land of the free, home of the brave, and the home of Johns Hopkins. This is that Hopkins COVID tracker. Pretty amazing, huh? Imagine what they might have thought about this in 1918 during the Spanish flu, that we can see and track down to individual places on the planet where cases are rising, where they're declining, whether we're bending the curve down, whether we're not. And I'd submit to you that there is a new language of this new way that's emerging in this tragedy, and for all its death and for all of the challenge. What Fareed Zakaria called a stress test for governments, there is nonetheless a new vocabulary of collaboration that's emerging. And it's a vocabulary also of this new way of governing. If the old way of governing was hierarchical and bureaucratic, from the top down, command and control, this new way is different. It is entrepreneurial. In other words, ask the question, does it work or does it not? It is performance measured, it is interactive, and it is collaborative. And here's the two shifts. The first is a shift in our concept, the way we imagine leadership to be. On the left is the way we used to imagine leadership to be, of big endeavors like our government. Authority was high atop that pyramid of command and control. And at the top of that pyramid, the leader held the power. The leader also held something else. And that something else was information. But in the information age, when everybody knows things at the same time as the leader, being atop that pyramid of command and control is no longer sufficient for getting things done or for even having legitimacy. No, the place of positional and situational advantage for a modern leader in the information age is in the center of that collaborative circle on the right, as close to the latest emerging truth as possible. Because here's the second shift, and it is about management. In the information age, when everybody knows things at the same time as the leader, things don't get done according to the rule of because I told you to do it. It's a shift from command and control instead to collaboration. Collaboration based on shared understanding of what's happening when and how our actions change what's happening. True story. When I was first elected mayor of Baltimore back in 1999, the outgoing mayor arranged for some transition meetings. So I found myself sitting with the outgoing director of public works, and having served on the city council and having a big fight on our hands to make the city safer and also to free our neighbors of the scourge of drug addiction, I needed every dollar I could find from every place else. And I knew from the annual budget, and let's be honest, that's how we always did things before in government, annually. I knew from the annual budget that the cost of maintaining our fleet of cars and trucks was enormous. And usually there were supplemental budget appropriations that came in at the end of the year to pay for keeping those old trucks and cars in good repair. So I asked the head of Public Works, outgoing, how many cars and trucks do we actually own? His answer was 6,000. I said, 6,000? He said, 6,500. I said, 6,500? What is this, a quiz show? I would have thought that you would know. And scratching his head, he said, well, you know, in any big organizations, there's some things you never entirely get on top of. And we've never really gotten on top of how many cars and trucks we actually own. Now, a more rational human being might have run down the hallway like the Cowardly Lion and jumped out the window, but I knew that was the way things were because I had served on the council for 8 years. And there were a lot of old rules by which city government operated. See if any of these are familiar to you. This is by way of contrast to the new. Here's the old set tenets of city government. If the mayor really wants to know, we can find out, but we'll have to pull all our people off their other jobs, and it will take weeks. By the way, feel free to substitute secretary, division chief, or governor instead of mayor. Second old tenet of city government. We'll get to that as soon as we can, but it's going to take a few months because our budget was cut last year, implicitly by you jerk. Third tenet of city government. Note the overuse of the word here. That wouldn't work here because this is the way we've always done it here. Or we're already doing that here. Or we tried that once here and it didn't work. And then the fourth tenet of city government. I hope everybody forgets about this question before next year's annual budget hearing. When I was elected mayor, we borrowed from the NYPD, lock, stock, and barrel, a way of performance management based on the shared understanding of what was happening where on the map that was called CompStat. And we took it enterprise-wide and called it CityStat. Once every 2 weeks, 10 different departments and their command staffs would come before me as mayor and my command staff, you know, finance director, head of IT, city solicitor, labor commissioner. And we would focus for one blessed hour on whatever the primary mission of that department was for the greater good of the whole, whether it was police or fire or trash or housing. And the conversations focused on the map and what was happening when and how we might change it, all had these primary elements of questions and answers based on timely, accurate information shared by all, rapid deployment of resources, effective tactics and strategies, relentless follow-up and assessment. And after 1 2-week period where we had 10 different meetings, sometimes 2 a day for no longer than an hour, with a note taker, with a short agenda, we would repeat the process over again. And that's how we rolled for 7 years as a mayoral administration and 8 years as a gubernatorial administration. And some of the hallmarks of this new way of governing, in addition to openness, transparency, timely, accurate information shared by all, were a couple of other things. We actually set strategic goals, a limited number, but we set those goals with deadlines and we published them so everybody could see. That's different than 240 years of political wisdom that says leaders should never set goals with deadlines, because if you fail to hit them or fail to hit them in whole, then you'll get criticized. Your opponents will attack you. I found the opposite. I found that people figured out that 70% progress towards a critical goal, like improving education or reducing crime against women and children, was actually something people could readily see and appreciate. And if the leader doesn't stick her neck out, how do you expect the rest of the organization to do it? So we set strategic goals with deadlines. We also created public-facing dashboards. Oh, do you mean like public-facing dashboards just for yourself and for your command staff? No, I meant for everybody, for citizens. So every citizen could see the same executive dashboards that I was seeing that told me whether we were making progress or not, with simple red light to green light sort of arrows. that told us whether we were on track, whether we weren't, whether we needed to do something differently in order to achieve our goals. But here's the thing. None of this works unless the leader insists and drives that repeating cadence of collaboration and follow-up. You know, don't wait. Jack Maple, who had invented CompStat for the NYPD, once asked me as a new mayor, he said, do you want to make 1% progress annually? Because you're already set up for that. It's called the budget. Or do you want to make 1% progress every 2 weeks? You know, I wasn't a math major, but I said, oh, I want to make 1% progress every 2 weeks. He said, then you have to create a repeating cadence that's every 2 weeks, focused on the latest emerging truth of what's working and what's not. You know, recently, some of us had occasion to see what George Stephanopoulos called the worst presidential debate in U.S. history. But in his frustration, as he was constantly interrupted, we heard Vice President Biden frequently use the phrase, bringing people together. Now, I worked with Vice President Biden on the Recovery and Reinvestment Act as a governor. In fact, it was a shining example of using the map, of having public-facing dashboards for shovel-ready projects, extended unemployment benefits, and all of the other things that were part of that stimulus. It was a degree of openness and transparency, the likes of which our federal government had never achieved before and hasn't achieved since. But it's not as simple as just bringing people together. You have to do so repeatedly and relentlessly. And that's what the vice president did with all of us as governors. He had us all on the phone every 2 or 3 weeks asking whether this program why this program wasn't moving as fast as other programs, why the investments and the spend for people that really needed help wasn't happening as fast in this state as it was in that state. So not just as simple as bringing people together. You have to bring them together repeatedly and relentlessly. You have to focus on the latest emerging truth and follow it wherever it might lead. You have to give people the permission to ask the questions that lead to better understanding of what's happening, where, when, and why, so that we can do something about it, not once a year, but every day. A repeating cadence of collaboration. Let me conclude with 3 examples, okay? First example. Improving public safety. When I was elected mayor of Baltimore in 1999, our city had become the most violent, addicted, and abandoned city in America. In fact, more population loss than Detroit. They were doing a series of television series about Baltimore's crime problem, The Wire, The Corner, and our seeming inability to do anything about it. Well, we started actually getting the police department together, bringing them together around with a new way of community policing called CompStat. Again, timely, accurate information. And at the police department, it was 9 different departments every 2 weeks. And then the command staff over in City Hall every 2 weeks as well. Once to present on improving public safety. Another one, the other iteration, alternating, was how we police the police. And we were able to drive homicides down to below 300 in our first year of trying. We closed 10 open air drug markets, drove homicides below 300. And then the federal government kindly, at the prodding with our congressional delegation, helped us by sending Eric Holder to Baltimore to announce that our federal government was going to be sending us money to hire 200 additional police officers. Hallelujah. There wasn't a single neighborhood or neighborhood association in those days that wasn't asking for more professional and timely police response. So we had a decision to make, where to send them. That multicolored map you're looking at now are the 6 council districts of Baltimore. We could have brought in the senior council member from each of those 3 member districts and said, congratulations, you're going to be receiving 1/6 of 200 police officers. And we could distribute them equally. Well, that'd be one way to do it. In the old days, some people would have called that the fair way to do it. Or we could have looked at the map and seen where people voted for me in the greatest numbers and deployed them to those neighborhoods. Well, that would have been another way of performance management, but not the way I'm talking about. Or we could have looked at that map on the right And those tiny kidneys of death, relatively tiny compared to the landmass of our city, where year in and year out, the greatest numbers of our people were being shot, robbed, or murdered. As you might guess, we decided to deploy all 200 police officers to those places. And this is what happened. I'm going to show you, for the sake of brevity, the annual picture of progression. But this was the map we looked at week in and week out. This was the reality that we sought to change by leveraging leading actions and using the map for shared understanding of what was happening when and where. So this was 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7. We put Baltimore on a path for the biggest reduction in Part 1 crime of any major city in America. And in the course of that, saved a lot of lives. I want to share with you this other slide. This one's not from the NYPD, but from the LAPD, who also deployed CompStat, performance measured community policing. And this is how Sean Malinowski describes the evolution in their government. But I would submit to you, this is what we found in earning the Innovations in Government Award from the Kennedy School with the evolution throughout our city government. This is how Malinowski described LAPD. He said, we've moved from an organization where information was stovepiped to where it is shared by all. From making decisions based on hunch or intuition to an organization that makes decisions based on evidence. From responding to queries or calls for service to instead deploying to alerts. From the ability to make pretty maps to the ability to do predictive analytics. Second example, roads and bridges. Many of us remember the bridge collapse in Minnesota's I-35 West, evening rush hour, August 1st, 2007. Moms and dads plunging to their death in cars on their way to work on a bridge that everybody knew was old and rickety and structurally weak. Shortly after this tragedy, the National Governors Association meeting, Jack Dangerman from Esri was there. And knowing that my colleague, Governor Rendell from Philadelphia, was our leading voice for greater investments in infrastructure, he said, you have to corral Governor Rendell into a corner for me so I can show him this new bridge app that I've created. I said, oh, Jack, you don't understand. Governor Rendell doesn't like blind meetings. And unlike most mayors who have a 2-minute attention span, Governor Rendell's is down to 45 seconds. He's a real pro. He said, whatever it takes, just please give me 45 seconds. So I drag a grousing Governor Rendell into the corner with Jack Dangerman and his laptop. And I tell Jack, you have 45 seconds. And so Jack says, this is a map of Minnesota. With the first click, he shows this map of Minnesota with a bunch of green dots on it. He said, each green dot is one of the bridges of Minnesota. Second click. Now I've color-coded these bridges in a simple red light to green light fashion. The green ones represent bridges that are strong, structurally sound. The red ones are rickety, structurally deficient bridges in urgent need of repair. Then he did the third click. He said, now I've changed the size of these dots to reflect how many human souls travel over those bridges every day. And he said, now with the fourth click, I want to show you, even as these targets emerge, where the federal dollars for keeping those bridges in good repair land. And with the fourth click, Governor Rendell exclaimed that none of the dollars are landing on the targets. To which Jack Dangerman responded, no, but they're all landing on the map. They're all landing on the map. They're landing on the map. Our challenge is to make sure that they land where they're needed, where we can do the most good, where we can save the most lives. I've been working these last couple of years with Grant Thornton Advisory, and this is a slide that I borrowed for my book from Grant Thornton. This is in the context of reducing traffic fatalities, but it really explains why the map and why the data is so valuable and so essential, and also so readily available for us to do better. The first step is descriptive, right? How many accidents occurred this week? Second one, diagnostic. What are the causes of the accidents? Third step, predictive. How many accidents will therefore occur next week and where? What actions can I take to prevent those accidents? Where? So many governments, state governments, have a hard time just getting to that first step. Some better ones are taking it to steps 2, 3, and 4. Third and final one, clean water. Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in all of North America. Comes right up through the center of my state of Maryland, but it is a watershed that expands over 6 different states, going all the way up through central Pennsylvania, takes in parts of New York, and for 300 years, population growth, especially on the western shore, between Washington and Baltimore and up to Philadelphia, population growth, industrial agriculture. We had for 300 years, the health of the Chesapeake Bay had been in decline. I say that passively. More properly, we had been harming the health of the Chesapeake Bay through all of the activities of, modern civilization, from the paved surfaces to wastewater treatment plants to septic systems to stormwater runoff. So to reverse that 300-year decline, and we had a lot of good science too. We were great at measuring the decline, but the truth was we weren't so good at measuring the actions that would reverse the decline. So we took this same approach. We used the map. That map in the center shows you the relative share of what was degrading the health of the bay. The yellow comes from agriculture. The red is the wastewater treatment plants. That blue piece of the pie is stormwater runoff. The purple is septic systems. But we also started plotting something else. We started plotting the actions that would actually reduce the flow of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. We had every month at CityStat meetings where not only the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Environment, Secretary of Natural Resources, but also the Secretary of Transportation, who was responsible for more paved land than anybody else in the state. We also had somebody else at the table, and that was science. The scientists from the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. I didn't appoint them. They didn't answer to me. They were independent, and they called the balls and strikes. And one of the things they called the balls and strikes on was the objective measures of bay health. They created an index combining these 6 factors: water quality, chlorophyll A, dissolved oxygen, benthic life, subaquatic grasses, and phytoplankton life. And they combined it into, you guessed it, red light, green light fashion on the 10 main tributaries that flow from those 6 states into the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay. And then we started doing, the other thing that the scientists helped us with was they helped us realize there were not 34,000 actions we could take, not 3,400, but really 34 actions that would actually reduce the flow of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment into the bay. A lot of them, yes, were across agriculture, but not all of them. But each of these had a score. In other words, an amount of nitrogen that they would reduce. What top action? Plant 145,000 additional acres of cover crops every year. And it will yield you 870,000 pounds of nitrogen reduction. And we started mapping them. Had set 2-year milestones. Our goal was to reach the Healthier Bay tipping point by 2020. And I'll be damned, once we started showing the art of the possible, the other states joined in. And then President Obama made it his #1 priority when he was elected president in terms of an executive order on a large body of water. We let people see whether we were making progress towards these things, including the upgrade of our wastewater treatment plants. We mapped those projects, showed people where we were over a time and space continuum and place. Started looking at things that we did on restoring natural filters on land, the natural buffers, stormwater remediation programs, projects. You get the point. It was all about the shared understanding around the map, what was happening, when and where, and how we might take actions to change that reality. So this is a progression. That's where we were in 2006. Red is dead. Orange is really sick. Yellow is jaundice sick. There was no area in that watershed that was green and healthy. But every month, repeating cadence of collaboration and getting the other 6 states to join in. And oh, by the way, EPA playing along with Chesapeake Stat also, and its potential for enforcement, as well as its power to share information. This was 2006, 2007, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. You know, when we started off on this, I had a hell of a time convincing my environmental secretary that we should have a goal with a deadline of reversing the declining health of the Bay. She begged me, and she's an awesome person, was an awesome administrator, really knew her science. She said, please, Governor, don't set a goal on improving the health of the waters. I said, why not? She said, because it could take a really long time. I said, well, we better start now then. And she said, but you shouldn't set a goal. Please don't set a goal. I said, why? She said, what if you don't hit it? I said, what if we do? She said, yeah, but what if we don't? I said, yeah, but what if we do? How long are we going to play this game? Most of the time, we set the goal of reaching the Healthier Bay tipping point, that point at which our actions on land collectively would join forces with the restorative power of nature to make the waters of the Bay a little cleaner every year instead of sicker. Most of the scientists believe we hit that tipping point in 2016, 4 years in advance of our deadline. But make no mistake about it, folks, free people. The rock can roll back down the hill. And whether it's on public safety or improving the health of the Chesapeake Bay, the politics and the nature of management or mismanagement or mediocre management always wants to kind of revert to its old form. So you got to keep pushing. So conclusion here, y'all been very patient. Start and don't stop. Your data will never be perfect. Don't wait for the data to be perfect. Wherever you are in a human organization, start and don't stop. And by start, I mean share the information openly, transparently, repeatedly. Picture it on a map. Let everybody see it. Start and don't stop. Create a repeating cadence of collaboration and accountability. Embrace a radical commitment to openness and transparency. Measure performance to lift up your leaders. Have the courage to set public goals with public deadlines. There's no need for us to wait till there's a sensor on every blade of grass and every superhighway. We already have sensors. They're called citizens, and they're armed with more computing and communicating power than was in the early Apollo missions. So, hey, let's go. We have a big job ahead of us. We've got to restore the trust necessary that'll put oxygen back into our democracy, that'll allow us to make progress. not only to save our country, but also to save the planet, to apply geography for life-giving purposes. Thanks a lot.
Really outstanding talk, Governor O'Malley. We really appreciate it.
Hey,
Thank
cool.
you so much. Yeah.
I'm glad you were still there. When I went back and I didn't hear anything, I thought, oh, holy shnikes, I lost them like 20 minutes ago. You all were so quiet.
Yeah, we didn't want to interrupt. So anyway, that was really, really great. And we're going to take questions now. Murray,
Okay.
would you, so if anybody has a question, please go ahead and put it into the chat pane. You covered a lot of wonderful material and really enabled us to see the power of the impact of maps, right? The impact of the data-driven decision making. I mean, you're like living proof of it. I love how you took that from, over about 10 years and really showed how the environment got cleaned up. That was really wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, I could have shown other examples. I was doing this once for a state, doing it for New Mexico, and there was a legislator on the panel, and he goes, well, we're mostly concerned about vulnerable kids, and I don't see where this applies to any of that. Well, I used to kind of play the same game with Jack Maple. He'd say, give me a problem, because I thought, well, this method might work better for some things than for others. So I could have shown you other examples. With vulnerable kids, we did the same thing,
Right.
And there were lagging indicators. One of those lagging indicators was the number of kids we automatically, just by tradition, would rip out of homes and put in foster care, where, by the way, many would receive worse outcomes than they would have if we instead did the work of healing the family on the front end. So we were able to reduce by 48% the number of kids that we placed in foster care. And guess what? I think causally, not coincidentally, we were also able to cut in half the number of juvenile homicides in our state over that same period of time. But there were a whole host of leading actions in between. We didn't wait for an annual budget meeting to ask ourselves whether what we were doing was working or not to heal the families and reduce the out-of-home foster care placements. We were doing that every 2 weeks. And again, it was the map. It was the method. It was actions based on shared understanding rather than because I told you to do it, or the beatings will continue until better results, But questions, you guys been hearing my voice long enough. Give me some questions, Doc.
Yeah,
please. Are you going to hit me with the questions, or will
Murray?
Murray?
Murray, do you have any questions? I'm looking at so if you have a question, please go ahead and type in the chat. There's some comments in there.
Or do you want me to look at the chat box?
No.
I saw Rich say his sister voted for me. Thank you, Rich, for your sister voting for me. God bless her. She's got really good judgment and leaders.
Maybe we should also mention, just as we're getting started with questions, we are recording this and we will make this available later with the governor's permission. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
That's great.
That's why I said holy shnikes.
So somebody says here, thank you for the emphasis on transparency and of course on the power of mapping. We are working to apply these same approaches to the electoral redistricting process. And then she lists a website. So have you done anything? I mean, any thoughts on translating the work that you've done here with the environment to redistricting, Governor O'Malley?
Yeah, it's a shame. Politicians tend to use the map really, really well when it comes to redistricting, huh?
Yeah, they do.
They use it so well that they carve our voices into irrelevance before the first vote is cast when it comes to our so-called House of Representatives. So I went through a redistricting process as an executive twice, once as mayor, because I had to do our council districts, and then as governor. It has been said that Maryland's map was the most gerrymandered Democratic map in the country, to which I say thank you. I felt in a system of checks and balances that it was my responsibility to counteract what was happening in Ohio and North Carolina and other places. When I ran for president, along with some other things like publicly financed elections, I think there's a few core things we need to do with regard to the structure of our democracy, and certainly redistricting and the way that we allow legally a partisan motive to be used in redistricting. It's antiquated, doesn't serve our democracy anymore, and we need to find a way to do away with it. I know in California, you all have a bipartisan redistricting commission, so perhaps that's the way to go. Anything that would get that partisan motive out of it, I think would be really healthy for the Republic. And of course, the map can help in all of that. I forget the story. What was the story? Use your powers for good.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the power of the map and the data to add to the polarization in our country. And that's what we've mostly been doing. And it's too bad. If only we would use those powers for good. So
agree.
Thank you for the good work that you do. And hopefully we'll get beyond the partisan redistricting thing. I was hopeful that the Supreme Court would strike it down. In fact, they deposed me, Sheila.
Really?
They took my case, and I think Wisconsin's up to the court. And I did my very best to spike the ball. They scheduled like 4 hours for my deposition. And they said, how hard did you work to draw this map in a way that would elect an additional Democratic congressperson? I said, as hard as I possibly could. But even with that, the court wouldn't interject. They had scheduled, like I say, many hours for the deposition. They asked that same question 3 or 4 more ways, and then they said, thanks for coming by. So hopefully we'll get beyond this.
Yeah, great. So there's some other questions here. I'm going to pick them up for you. So here's one from...
I'll try to be more brief.
Yeah, no, that was a great answer. Very interesting to hear your story of the Supreme Court. So here's one from Rich. This asset and infrastructure intelligence effort backed by maps and good quality data, which are actionable, is good. What do you see as the future of predictive analysis?
Yeah, I think there is a cloud about to burst of the embrace of predictive analytics and everything that we're now able to do that we could never do before. I mentioned, I think in this talk, I know I did, because I showed the steps. I work with Grant Thornton as a smart governance advisor and state and local government with Grant Thornton. You are seeing more and more transportation agencies using predictive analytics. They seem, not everywhere, but they seem to be the cutting edge in state and local government in using the map and predictive analytics in order to improve outcomes for all of us as citizens, whether those outcomes are reducing traffic accidents or improving or reducing traffic congestion. You also see there have been some requirements that the federal government is making of states, which actually preceded the current federal administration, that you see a lot of transportation departments using this in terms of asset management, life cycle costs, whether it's of their bridges or of their fleets, or of different modes of transportation, in order to get a handle on what it means in terms of not only traffic congestion, but also sustainability. I mean, there's a lot of different parameters that you can build into predictive analytics. At the end of the day, it is the ability to model, measure, and map dynamic, changing human systems or natural systems over a time-space continuum so that you can optimize for better results, I mean, that's what it's about. And the parameters that you put into this predictive analytics will, will determine what those outcomes are. I mean, if you wanted to have blinders on and say, don't give a rat's ass, all I care about is building more lanes of highways, okay, well, then don't factor in, the other outcomes. But in this movement to the greater well-being of the whole, there is an opportunity to crunch a lot of numbers very, very fast with a degree of openness and transparency and visibility that I believe is going to allow for much greater consensus among the governed as to the rationale for those investments over time and the balance.
That's great. So I think you just answered one of the questions from Amy Moles, who said, I missed one step in predictive analysis. Can you repeat them? But I heard you say that in your answer. So I think you caught that one.
Yeah,
right?
and you recorded it, right? And I'll give you the slide deck so you can post
That'd be
it.
great.
Yeah,
that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, the steps go from descriptive. Here, I have it here. I know, in fact, it happens to be just page 279.
You have it marked.
Awesome book. Yeah, so Amy, the first step is descriptive. How many accidents occurred this week? Second, diagnostic. What were the causes? Third is predictive, like how many, where, and when will therefore occur next week. And then the fourth one is prescriptive. What actions can we take where to prevent it? So descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. Boom.
Great.
And if you pass that, you'll get that one right on the quiz.
You'll get an A. So
right,
we have
an A.
There you go. So we got a comment here from Joseph Kursky from Esri. He says, Governor O'Malley, I'm at Esri with some of my Esri colleagues. We heard the Minnesota 45-second story from Jack Dangerman, and it's great to hear your version, which is actually the same as Jack's story, the power of GIS to help people understand what needs to be done and why. A little ground truthing there from Joseph Kursky at Esri. There you go. So we got another question from Michael Ratcliffe from the U.S. Census. Great examples for Baltimore, but any given city's issues are often regional in extent. Did you have any success getting the surrounding counties to adopt evidence-based and geospatially focused analysis and decision-making for the Baltimore region?
Yes. It's interesting when you start doing this in the center, and our city has, our state has, two metropolitan centers. One is Baltimore and the other is the Washington area. But 80% of Maryland's population is in the biggest 8 counties. So Baltimore did CityStat. There was a stat process that was adopted by the county executive in Baltimore County, which is a separate county that, almost like a big horseshoe that goes all the way up to the Mason-Dixon line. With the Baltimore Metropolitan Planning Council, we used that forum for all of our sort of post 9/11 actions. What were the actions we could take that would make our region more resilient in terms of the highway connections, the rail connections? We used that as our place where where all of the county executives met. So in addition, its original purpose was for transportation planning purposes. But we used that also for homeland security and resiliency. And we did have consensus there on the transportation stuff, where we wanted, what our 6-year capital plan was, and had a remarkable amount of consensus for the building of an east-west mass transit link that would have connected those poorest areas of our city. I say it was remarkable consensus because it, was a project that primarily served the city of Baltimore, but there was a metropolitan consensus around its importance for the health of the whole metro area. Sadly, we got green-lighted by President Obama, but our Republican governor that followed me decided that to kill the project so he could use the money for roads and sprawl.
That's
and
too
his
bad.
real estate project. He's a very active real estate developer. First governor in Maryland history to make himself a multimillionaire while in office. I saw it. That made you choke. Next question.
It did, but I muted. Okay, this is the last question because then we know people have to get to other sessions. But this one says, what kinds of discussions are happening among city and state leaders regarding the challenges of achieving an accurate census count? Even if people aren't counted, they still need services and to drive over bridges.
Well, I don't know that there's a substitute for an accurate census count. Hard to believe that the post office or the census would become partisan things. I'm not aware what cities are doing beyond. I know that cities are take upon themselves with a campaign-like fervor getting an accurate count, and I don't think that there's a substitute for that. So hopefully, please God, as this election happens and the Supreme Court has its considerations, we get an accurate count of our people. It's why we do a census every 10 years. I'm not sure that there's a substitute for it. And I'm not aware that of any city doing something independent of the decennial census.
Right. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you, Governor O'Malley. How about a round of applause for
Thank
Governor
you, guys.
O'Malley? And if we didn't get to
Thanks
your
a lot.
question, it looked like there was just some comments in there, but thank you. We know we have to wrap it up because other sessions are starting. Wonderful talk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn it back over to Murray Rice.
Well, I don't really have very much more to say, except again, thank you to Governor O'Malley, and thank you to everyone in the session for the excellent discussion and questions. And we will be posting this on somewhere. I have no details at the moment, but we will circulate news around to everyone when we have posted it. So thank you again, Governor. Really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you, Murray.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Great
Thank
meeting.
you,
See you now.
Governor.
Bye-bye.
Great job.
Bye, Dr.
Outstanding
Sandberg.
job.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
great to see
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Okay.
Great
Bye.
seeing you, Sheila.